So thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us. So,
Thank you.
If you may not know this, but when nGage first called Kevin, he was still working at Dell. So not that long ago. So we're going to talk a little bit about Kevin's journey. So Kevin was the president for Dell Canada prior to joining Microsoft Canada. A long time with Dell.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into the conversation, though, a little bit, Kevin asked us to if we could show a video first. So this is a cause and a topic that's near and dear to Kevin's heart. So let's roll this video, because I think it helps us kick off the whole conversation.
My favorite subject in school is science, because you can invent all different kinds of cool things, and there's like no limit what you can do.
One inventor is Benjamin Franklin.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Thomas Edison.
Albert Einstein. Nikola Tesla.
Alexander Bell Graham.
No. It's kind of a tough one.
In school, it was always a male inventor. I just realized.
There's so much, I didn't even know this.
You're surprised because they only talk about Einstein and Benjamin, but you never hear a girl in a conversation.
To know that there were women before me,
It gives me like motivation that I can invent something and make maybe like a change in the world, and that would be really cool.
What do you think?
So I think that's a fantastic backdrop to our sort of first question, which is really about that the journey that you've made, partly from being an outsider to becoming now the insider at Microsoft.
Yes.
And when we talk about innovation, what do we need to do as a society as well as a company in terms of getting women into the IT industry? So maybe if you want to just start there in terms of what surprised you with going to Microsoft.
Sure. So first, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being here, engaging with some members of my team. We appreciate that. And I think it's a good framing of lifting up the dialogue and the responsibility for us as Canadians. If you look at the demographics of this room, it's predominant in one sex versus another. And as a Canadian, by the way, I'm the first Canadian president of Microsoft in 14 years. And it's an honor to have the position with the reach that the company has. But as a Canadian, I was previously involved, and I still am involved, as vice chair of the Information Technology Association of Canada. And there are a few stats that we should be thinking about as an industry. Number one, earlier this morning there was a discussion around talent. There are over 100,000 open tech jobs in Canada right now, 100,000. If we look at the distribution of individuals across our tech landscape, the top 10 tech firms have 11% of their team members as female. If we look at my organization, which employs 2,600 team members across the country, we have approximately 70% more than that. We have about 28% team members that are female. Nowhere close to the parity of distribution in terms of talent and activation of talent in this country. So I have a daughter. This is, things I think come home personally. And my lens has been significantly changed since the birth of my daughter as I think about the activation of every team member that we have in my company and every member of the Canadian society. Raising it up a level as a passionate Canadian, Lars knows, but I grew up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. My dad was a biochemist. My mother was a store manager. And my family never really traveled outside of Canada. I set a little goal for myself to travel to 40 countries by the time I was 40. And by the time I was 40, I'd hit about 60 countries. And I've subsequently lived and worked on 5 continents, spending 17 years overseas. And so one thing I gained from that is just how competitive this world is. And if there's any mistake about that, take a visit to Shanghai, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and you will get a sense of how critically important it is for us as an industry to lead the way around this dialogue of activating every team member and person within it. So for me, it's critically important. Microsoft runs a multiple numbers of programs around girls in STEM, girls for code, of driving development. My leadership team in the country is 75% female. So we've taken a position of leading from the front. We hired last year over 155 interns and co-op students into Microsoft in Canada. And we had a concerted focus on finding female engineers, females in data science to bring onto our team. And we had a 50% intake of that talent base. And as we know across our industry, we all share. So members of that class who will spend time at Microsoft will potentially be within your organizations, will be in other partner organizations of ours, et cetera. So I think it's a really important platform for us as a country to dialogue in a couple of ways. One, think about it within your firm. There's an interesting stat. I went down with the CEO Council of Canada, which is now called the Business Council of Canada. 150 of Canada's leading CEOs from every bank, manufacturer, retailer. We went down to Silicon Valley and we visited LinkedIn, where the CEOs of LinkedIn and Microsoft, Satya, spoke. We went to Google's headquarters where Schmidt spoke. We were in Facebook. We were at the headquarters of Tesla. Et cetera, the list goes on. And every one of those organizations was talking about how they were increasing the diversity of their talent pool in every aspect to bring the best skills to bear to enhance their competitiveness. So I think there's a critical platform for us here in Canada. And my encouragement, I actually set this little thing out on LinkedIn last year, is as you're thinking about your firms, this room, and the thousands and thousands of people that this room hires, are you activating an internship program? And when you bring a candidate in, the actual percentage change, I'll give you one from nursing as an example. If there's 1 male nurse as a candidate and 4 female nurses, the percentage chance of that male nurse being hired are almost 0. If you have 2 male nurses as candidates in the pool of interviewees and the rest female, the percentages go up to about 28 to 30%. So think about that in terms of the candidate pool that your teams and yourselves are interviewing, and then take a chance on a student. The talent out there from the millennial generation is phenomenal. Forbes just rated Microsoft, the big survey, Microsoft is the #1 destination for millennials. And next was Amazon, then was Google, then was Facebook, and then was Disney. So they like the tech stuff, but not everybody is going to get a job at those companies. The whole idea of tech is resonating, and please put up your hand, find some dollars in the budget, and let's activate Canada from that perspective. So it's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I think that's
For me and for Microsoft.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you experienced being, insider in the tech industry for so long.
Yeah.
Going to Microsoft. What surprised you the most?
So who's here ever dealt with Dell? Thank you. Who's ever dealt with Microsoft? Yeah, pretty much the whole room. I spent 14 and a half years with Dell. And I also worked for IBM, and I worked for other firms. And Dell, through the acquisition of EMC, is a phenomenal enterprise. I think I have incredible respect for Michael. In those 14 years, and HP's great, and Lenovo's great, everybody's great, I love you all. In those 14 years, though, I engaged with Microsoft. And I've ran pretty much every business unit there was in Dell, and I went over to Europe and ran 2 of our business units for all of Europe. So phenomenal experience and development in my career. What I found in engaging with Microsoft is it was pretty difficult. And obviously, as an OEM, Microsoft and Dell, I think Dell's one of Microsoft's leading customers as an OEM for devices that you may use on the desktop or on the notebook side. As a partner of Microsoft, it was always a bit difficult to understand. And it seemed in the dialogue of Microsoft that many of the transactions with their customers were kind of point transactions of engaging on aspects of their business, implementing those aspects of their business, and then moving to the next dialogue in a year's time or 2 years' time. This aspect of digital transformation that we're discussing here, that everybody has at the top of their tongue, which is why 150 CEOs took 3 days out of their precious time to go down to Silicon Valley, has permeated well through the organization. And for me, it was really apparent as I looked at what Satya was doing in the leadership of Microsoft and in the pervasiveness of the Office environment moving to the cloud, the Azure platform moving to the cloud, the engagement with SAP, with open source technologies through Linux and others, that Microsoft was fundamentally changing. And what I kept hearing from CEOs and CIOs as I went across the country was, we need to have an outcome-based discussion. We don't want to have a discussion around infrastructure. We don't want to have a discussion around our networking. We just need that to work. We need to raise the dialogue to how we're going to be fundamentally different in the digital transformation space. And so for me, when Microsoft called, and it was a 4-year recruiting process, because I'm a very loyal guy, when Microsoft called 4 years later, I went, yeah, this is the right time. And what I've noticed, here's the insider view from outside, is I knew about Microsoft from a standpoint of the software that we utilize. I knew about it from a SQL perspective of the databases and the engagement on the server side, and I'd heard about Azure. But when I entered the company, Lars, and got engaged across the breadth of products and the depth within, it's a pretty amazing place.
Yeah.
And so the second piece is, from a cultural perspective, I hope that you as customers are seeing this or are starting to see this. There's been a tremendous movement driven by the top around what our mandate is for our customers at Microsoft. And that fundamental mandate really is about utilization of the tools, about enabling platforms for development of the next generation of applications and operations, and then around, importantly, the security components.
Yeah.
And so the ability to activate that and the drive within the company, we just completed the largest organizational transformation in the last 15 years to align all of our resources to those 3 components.
So talk to us a little bit about the Microsoft cloud strategy then, and how do you see cloud play out in Canada? You've traveled the world.
Yeah.
You've been in different roles.
Yeah.
How do you, what's your perspective on how Canada compares to other countries, and what have you seen in your discussions with clients? And I know
Sure.
that you wanted to share another video, and
Yeah.
I hope, videos are great because it gives you quick perspective that's slightly different. So maybe we want to start with that video.
Well, no, maybe if we can frame maybe just on the, so here's, this thing's ubiquitous, right? What's the cloud? Over the last few weeks, I've met with the CEOs and the CIOs of every major bank, of the major insurance companies, of legal firms, the president of Shared Services Canada. And this whole dialogue about the cloud, as we all know, is not a place. It is a fundamental operating model, a way of doing business. And from a Canadian perspective, as we look around the globe, we have been laggards to many countries and many regions on the planet. There's been a strong hesitancy and a holding on to the status quo. And one of the key things that I kept seeing in my previous role was there is just fundamental logic about activating on the cloud and activating on the platforms of the cloud. So I'm a full believer. I changed my career because of it. But when we look at Canada and we say, okay, well, where do we stand? 50% of our municipalities across the country are engaged with us in the cloud. 10 of 10 provinces and territories are engaged with us in the cloud. The shared services, sitting across from Ron Parker a couple of weeks ago, he shared that the average age of a server that is serving us as Canadians is over 6 years old in the federal government. And if you think about the relative updates, et cetera, and the security challenges with that type of an infrastructure, it scares the heck out of me. And so the shared services for the last year has been figuring out how to go actively into the cloud, and there are some major announcements that are imminent with multiple organizations and departments that are actively utilizing the cloud to fundamentally change the way in which they engage with the populace. So I think this whole cloud thing, we as Canadians need to be incredibly mindful and foresightful about how we should be thinking of our business moving forward. And the days of legacy build or buy components, I think you'll see organizations that are leapfrogging others because of the mindset. So yeah, maybe a good, I think it frames it up from a customer perspective. I got a range of videos could show you, but this one, I tried to make sure it wasn't like a Microsoft commercial. This one's an interesting one from Embed, which is a phenomenal organization impacting 1 million plus Canadians. So maybe we roll the video and have a look.
Embed is the largest energy transportation company in North America, and our #1 focus is on safety. Our purpose is to connect people with the energy they need in their daily lives. This could be to heat their homes, or to cook their meals, drive their kids to hockey practice, or perhaps take a flight to a warmer climate during a cold Canadian winter. In the end, life takes energy, and it's our job to safely deliver that energy.
When you have 17 wind farms fueling over 1 million homes a year, there's a lot of data that comes with that. We're always on a continual path to find ways to enhance our safety initiatives, and we're really looking to technology to be able to deliver on that.
It really is all about the data. We have millions of sensors firing every second across our systems. What you need to be able to do is get to the pieces that matter. Microsoft Azure is the platform that we use to get to the right data, to ensure that we're employing the right resources to the right location at the right time. The real benefit of a cloud-based solution is to have a platform deployed for you that you do not have to configure yourself. So you're essentially walking into a room that's already ready for you to utilize. With the Azure platform, in a lot of cases, we are able to deploy things, not change business process, and not change technologies, but change substantially the type of information that people get. So it becomes quite seamless in their everyday realm.
It's from a wind turbine project that we were able to leverage Azure to gain tremendous benefits from their remaining useful life and predictability of our blades. By identifying and predicting blade reliability, we're able to focus our staff on observations that really matter, to focus their time and attention on those blades that require the most maintenance.
Based on our experience, the biggest thing I think I would pass along to other organizations is that if you want to be effective with advanced analytics, you have to abandon traditional IT methods. Using a platform allows you to be able to experiment quickly, determine what works, what does not, in an economic environment. Ultimately, that is about getting our people home safely and ensuring that we're keeping the public safe as well.
Fantastic story. So the types of data that nGage has, some people would say that's maybe it's not personal data, it's not privacy.
Yeah.
In your conversations with CEOs across country, what
Yes.
are obstacles or questions that they raise around security, cloud security?
Sure.
Can you comment
sure.
on that?
On the security side, obviously critical, and every board is having that dialogue. Was recently with Brian Porter and Barrett and Dave Mackay of the CEOs of our major banking institutions. And if you look at their expenditures, I met with the CFO of RBC recently as well, and if you look at the expenditures, it is phenomenal how much they are spending on security. So there's two components. One is obviously the data breach and that movement of data into the wrong hands. The other one, which frankly the CEOs care as much about, as you can imagine, is reputational risk. And so this dialogue is of paramount importance to them. What was interesting for me is I hear this rhetoric in the market, and I heard it before of, that public cloud environment is not as secure, or you got to watch out for that public cloud environment. I would challenge anyone around any data center that people in this room are operating that is close to being as secure as the platforms of the major cloud providers. We're talking about a scale here which is absolutely unprecedented. Satya, in the last leadership meeting I was on with him, he shared with us that our capital expenditures this year, on top of the 36 regional hubs that we have, is $9 billion US. Just capital expenditures for this year on top of the other 36. And if we look at the individuals and we think of the Azure information services and protection services that we have, the amount of exposure that we get through 1 billion endpoints of devices, through 200 billion emails that we see on a near daily basis, of 300 billion Active Directory instances that we receive information on, collaborate, and then utilize to protect against the threats out there through our cybersecurity threat protection, through our engagement with government officers, et cetera. It's unprecedented. And what's been interesting is, if I look at, and I won't name them because they might not be publicly named, but the CIOs of institutions who hold their data as to an absolute business critical, every one of them has stated that we know we cannot be as secure as we will be when we fully move into this cloud environment. And I think it's this concept sometimes of there's this fear of public cloud, or everything's public, anybody can get into it. A good way of demystifying it is just thinking of it as tenants, in the sense of I have an on-premise tenant and I've got an off-premise tenant. And that off-premise tenant is run by Microsoft, AWS, Google, whoever, but that's my off-premise tenant. And I think, if we can get past the status quo, then there's a fundamental opportunity for us to activate the power of platforms. Because to me, it's all about forget servers. It's a serverless world. Everybody's heard the analogy, but at home, you don't look for which power station is fueling the outlet that your TV's in, and which power station is fueling the light switch when you walk in the door. You don't care. Right. You just want the power to work. You want to be able to access that. And there's no doubt about what the end state is here. There's absolutely no doubt. And so I think that foundation component of the platform decision is one that we're seeing in every instance. And even with Ron Parker at Shared Services, thank goodness, federal government, you're finally listening, where they spent $387 billion, I believe he related to me, in updating a small component of their server data center, servers and networking in their data center, that they see the fact that they need to move actively, and that's cool. I'll tell you, so we had the WannaCry virus, remember, or the WannaCry instance? When we looked at our advanced threat protection services that we offer on top of our platform, our cloud-based platform, Office 365, out of our 175 million users, there was not one instance of one of our customers being impacted by that. And the reason was we saw what was happening and shut it down for our users before that happened.
Right.
And so that kind of scales.
Yeah.
Really something that is critical these days.
So talk to us a little bit about data residency has always been a topic.
Sure.
And I know Microsoft and some of the others have made big investments.
Yes.
So what's been the response to that?
Yeah, so just for, I love this part. I actually had a customer in our briefing center yesterday. I was in Toronto and we were meeting with one of the large system integrators, and then I walked out and my team asked me to come in on a large engagement we're doing for a customer around business intelligence and dynamics. And so I had this dialogue, and the customer asked a really great question, which was, well, you're Microsoft and you have this phenomenal cloud investment. What do you think about Google and Amazon entering the Canadian market? And here, for those of you who don't know, in Quebec City, we have a data center. We built dual redundancy data centers. That's our fundamental philosophy on entering a country or region. And we have a data center in Toronto. And we made that investment in Canada because of data residency. We are HIPAA, name the compliance across each of the provinces. We are compliant across the requirements so that we can service healthcare, financial institutions, government entities where data residency is critical. And that's a key bar for us to follow. But in relation to other major providers coming in the market, I have a very clear view that is fantastic. As if there is more press understanding capability for you, more choice for you, there's less of a statement of we're going to sit in, as I mentioned before, the status quo. And that advances the opportunity for Canada to be competitive on a global stage.
Absolutely.
And I think there was a stat up in one of the first charts this morning about this new digital information component is a $1.7 trillion opportunity. There's enough cheese, crackers, crumbs for everybody in this industry. I have no concerns about that. Our cloud Azure platform in the last couple of quarters, it's growing at over 90% year over year. I mean, these businesses are in hyper growth. AWS was, I think, 42%. Google, I don't think they could discern from the numbers. But there's lots out there because we have only, as a society and companies, we've only just begun on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we stay on that theme of security, what about from an employee product? So we've talked about security in the cloud. Talk to us about from my personal experience. What is Microsoft doing to embed cloud into products and services that touch?
I had a chat with my friend last night, Sherry from University of Saskatchewan, and we were talking about this of, you think I kind of bundle security in three ways. One is if security impacts productivity, security will be less secure. So, that whole idea of a multi-factor authentication. Sherry's got some specific, challenges with the environment she runs with, but which one of us likes to log in 3 times to actually get in? Like nobody. You do? You like logging in 3 times? Yeah, there we go. So nobody does. So I think that's a first platform. The second on security is it truly is about identity. It's between 63, 68% of all breaches are due to lapses in the identity component of infrastructure. And then there's a third component, which is pretty much everyone will be breached at some stage. So how are you prepared for that? So, you know, we spoke, we have this conference called Ready, where we share what our vision is on this. And our vision around security is that we will live in a world with no passwords. And every one of you who's ever supported your users will be going, wouldn't that be amazing? Because that's a pain in the ass for me. Pain in the derriere, awful say, for me. And so I think that's cool. I'll tell you, when I went from a previous entity, which had multi-factor authentication, to landing in Microsoft, receiving a Surface device, and here, you know, I go in for the first time, and I open up my device, and my Surface launches up, and then it's effectively through facial recognition, through the 3D camera of the device. It's now looking for me, and it's going, "Where are you, Kevin? Did it find me?"
Don't ever do demos, Kevin.
Don't ever do demos. Yeah, no, that's all right. I'm gonna launch it again because I was swinging it around.
Yeah, we could all sympathize with the MFA hassle, right?
Yeah. Oh, look at that. There we go. There's a demo that didn't work. Anyway, for me, when I apologies for that. When I launch in, it is literally a 2-second engagement the vast majority of the time, and I would say 98% of the time. Yeah. And so it doesn't matter if I'm in the office, if I'm at a new venue, it's not only registering me from a facial standpoint, or as on our phones, a thumb point, but it's also recognizing the device I'm on from a factor authentication. It's going back to my Active Directory system and ensuring that. I think we will be in that place and in that world. And we're just completing a transaction with an energy company of rolling out, they're effectively rolling out an entire new platform of devices, 5,000 devices on Win 10, so that they can utilize that protection. The Department of Defense in the United Kingdom, as soon as legislation went through, they announced 200,000 members of the Department of Defense utilizing that type of authentication and device to simplify it and to provide that. The US Department of Defense signed a $1 billion contract for the same reason, all around security and that engagement we have with the devices.
Because it's a big topic. We heard it earlier today, and we're going to talk more about security tomorrow. Thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure we'd all love to be in that situation where we can just open our computing device, whatever that may look like.
And boom, we're in.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. We talked about cognitive applications, AI earlier today, and we're going to talk more about that tomorrow. So talk to us about what's Microsoft's strategy. How is Microsoft going to fuel that digital transformation revolution with AI and cognitive? What's the approach that you're taking?
Sure. So who in here is running an AI program at the moment? I know there's been lots of chat about it. You're trying to implement something in your organization with artificial intelligence. Do we have many? Yeah, so maybe 20% or so, 30%. Does anybody in the audience, are you getting questions from the business units, from the leadership team about it? Do we have that happening in your organizations about AI? Tell me about AI. What are we doing for AI? Is that happening at all? I think AI in and of itself is fascinating. Our fundamental philosophy is that we believe that AI is going to be and is currently very difficult for organizations. I know there are some large financial institutions that have hired 50, 75 PhDs in data science. Not many people, not many companies can do that. In Microsoft, we have 8,000 engineers, PhDs, data scientists that are working in our AI program, 8,000. And so that's a pretty good base. The fundamental platform from our perspective is to, number one, democratize AI, artificial intelligence, democratize machine learning. And the belief from that perspective is that providing the layer above the platform for organizations to be able to develop their own related solutions. And through that, through various APIs and cognitive services of speech, language, vision, knowledge, search, providing that access through the platform, and for us it's the Azure platform, is a key component of how we will enable organizations to activate. And we have 100 services that if one of your team members you want to give them a side project, they're really keen on it, with sort of standard kind of development tools that from Python and all through, they can go through open source related tools, they can work in that environment. But I would recommend just let them go. Sign up for an Azure account. You'll get a couple $100 for free of development time. Pick something and they can test it out, right? And they can try it out. But I think that's one side. What we're seeing from a development though, Lars, is the ISV community, the industry solution vendor community in this country is fantastic. And there are organizations like Ruby Cloud, as an example. If anybody here is in the retail industry dealing with a large number of customers, Ruby Cloud is now a global leader in the provision of not only taking raw data sets and defining them down into very meaningful and manageable chunks, but then applying easy to implement machine learning technologies on top of them. And if you start looking at most major retailers in the United States, they are built off a Ruby Cloud platform. Underneath that is Azure, so we work with them, but they are literally utilizing the artificial intelligence cognitive services that we have inherently designed into the platform. So that's one side. The other side is, Satya, from a direction standpoint, for those of you who are working in SQL and you're using SQL on Azure, you don't need to have it on premise, move it onto Azure. If you are on Office 365 and you're in PowerPoint, you're in Word, etc., you're in Skype for Business, we are absolutely embedding all of those cognitive services with an AI-first mentality of how we communicate. So when we do PowerPoint, when our CEO does a PowerPoint or a presentation on Skype, it is real-time voice-to-text translation, and depending upon what region in the world you work for within Microsoft and what language, with 60 languages, you can push a button and get real-time translation on what Satya is saying and communicating to you through that platform. Phenomenally powerful. Yeah. If you're in PowerPoint, by the way, just super easy, and you have basic text in PowerPoint, a little cool kind of machine learning AI bit is you can go in and use the PowerPoint designer, which in the old days would give you fancy, colorful backgrounds. It will literally take your information and display it in multiple forms on the sidebar that you can pull from, whether they're images or texts, and you can look like you're a McKinsey consultant who's paid lots and lots of money to produce the slides. Amaze and wow your friends.
I'm going to use that for sure. I'd like to look like a McKinsey consultant. So let's pause there a little bit and maybe take some questions.
Sure.
Do we have a microphone?
What's top of mind? Come on, Canada.
What would you like to ask Kevin? Or what should Kevin work on?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you as well on your feedback as to what you would like to see from us. We have a huge team in Canada. We're super fortunate. We literally have access to the top 5% of most graduating classes in terms of the people that end up working at Microsoft. And so the amount of depth of knowledge on particular areas is quite mind-blowing. Yes, hi.
what are the innovations that you have planned for healthcare?
From a healthcare perspective, yeah. So there's a number of aspects within healthcare. There's an organization we're working with, as an example, that is based here in Montreal, CAE. You've heard of CAE. So CAE, for those of you who don't know, this is really cool. And it's right. Slight tangent for 1 second, and then I'm coming back. So CAE is a phenomenal organization. They build aircraft simulators. And so 70% of the world's market of aircraft simulators and over 70% of the world's pilots are trained on CAE equipment, designed right here in Montreal, contracts with the newest fighter jets that are being deployed in the US through to the Boeing 777s, et cetera, and Airbus planes. And that technology is phenomenal. Mark Parent is the CEO. Mark, and this is where I talk about leadership and your role and our collective role of what I talk to your CEOs about. By the way, the CEO of Scotiabank said, Kevin, I want to bring not my CTO and CIO, I want to bring my business unit leads, my legal counsel, my head of HR, my head of marketing to your briefing center to go through digital transformation so my entire leadership team can be engaged. Mark Parent did that. Now, he has access to a private plane, so it was a bit easier, but he propped in his legal, marketing, finance, 3 business unit presidents, his head of technology, and his head of communications. Plopped them on a plane, flew them to Seattle, and invested a day and a half to go through a full briefing around what is happening in in the world of digital transformation. And I say that because Mark understands he owns 70% of this entire market. Right. But he also realizes that pretty much every pilot on the planet goes through his facilities in some shape or form, and that's interesting data. And he also realizes that when he's training in a highly technical way, that there's applications in other areas. Aha! Wouldn't it be cool if for doctors who are relatively unregulated in terms of keeping up with their medical training, that we could provide a simulation experience that would allow them to not only accelerate their training in the first part of their career, but also assist them in transforming on new technologies. And so through the HoloLens, which is augmented reality, if you've never seen it, go YouTube CAE HoloLens. It'll blow your mind. Developed with his team of engineers on the HoloLens, the ability for, on mannequins, to be able to see the full respiratory systems, to be able to move the heart up, to be able to perform operations that are new, that are much less invasive to us as human beings, and being able to do all that through technology. That's an example of HoloLens now being rolled out at Harvard Medical School, et cetera, and doctors being able to get upgraded with their skills. So that's one aspect. I think there's a number of others around management of the data, around patient recognition that we're working on, around visualization. If you look at what we've done in terms of radiology, a radiologist is approximately, on average, 91% accurate in terms of their assessment of the scan that you've taken and irradiated your body for. Machine learning is 92% accurate. Whatever, 1% difference. But when you put the two of them together, the result is a 98% accuracy. Right. And so I'm a cancer survivor, and it was a doctor who found cancer in me 11 years ago, cut the stuff out, and I'm still here with my kids and my family. But geez, I'd rather have the 98% solution than the 91 or the 92. And so I think that's how we talk about the integration of technology. And the mission that I'm fully bought in for is to enable and empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. That's our mission as a company, and I'm all bought in. But it is outcomes like that which are really, really cool that can help various vertical markets and industries.
No, that's fantastic examples of deploying technology to enhance the outcomes. I mean,
It's incredible.
Yeah. Any
other questions? Yes, sir. Hi.
Mr. Gates, excuse me. Mr. Gates, or at least his foundation, and this is regarding the first video.
Yes, sir.
He's done an incredible job, at least with the Khan Academy, in taking a very simple idea, adding a lot of great content.
My kids both are doing advanced math on Khan Academy.
So my grandkids,
12 and 14 years old.
Huge. So what is Microsoft Canada doing regarding, let's say, STEM or anything else at the primary level, which research has shown that's where the real benefit is. There's great essays showing, about Mrs. P. It's kids that have actually great content and great teachers at the low level who end up much better citizens. So what is Microsoft doing in Canada regarding that first slide to enhance science, technology, education at the primary level?
No, very good. So there's a few components to that platform, and if one of my colleagues wants to add in, that's perfect. The first one is 2.5 weeks ago, I sat with the Minister of Education for the Ontario government, and we had a very detailed dialogue around the inclusion of the inclusion of coding and an advancement of the fundamental education system of reading, writing, and arithmetic that we've been living with for the last forever. And so we're pushing that within the provincial level. We have a senior leader who is working at the Prime Minister level around the same program of, as you know, this is much bigger than a Microsoft thing, of course, which is we need to challenge the education system to embed some of these core technologies earlier. So that's one side. There's a legislative component, there's a mandate, there's using our influence and lobbying power in that regard. The second piece is then getting practical from an education perspective. And this is where, if anyone, one of my children suffers from a learning challenge similar to dyslexia. And what is really cool that I didn't realize Microsoft had that's available to every student is a software that not only brings speech from the text, which allows them to learn better, but also changes the way the reading of material occurs specific to individuals who have difficulty reading with dyslexia, advances their reading, et cetera, on that side. When we purchased Minecraft, one of the primary components of purchasing Minecraft is the educational components around structurally thinking and design, which for those of you who have a computer science background, I was a math and finance guy, a computer science background, is a logical process step which we believe is great for early education. And by the way, contrary to shooting games for males, etc., girls are active in Minecraft and derivations of that. They're much more likely to get engaged from that type of a software engagement. And then the third piece, and I'll let you chime in if you got extra. No, a third piece is in terms of investments that we do through Bill Gates Foundation, in particular for lower income school areas, for Aboriginal communities, where we are participating in terms of not only STEM education, but also robotics programs for girls and for boys in that regard, participating there. And then across Canada, we run various contests and support other organizations that do that as well. There's a lot that needs to be done here, and there are many organizations that are at the forefront of helping our children be better. But I bring it back to the 40,000-foot lens, if I may, Lars, around, I'm super passionate about this, guys. I've seen a good chunk of the world, over 70 countries, as I mentioned, And we are unbelievably blessed to be born or to have come as an immigrant and be in this country. And it concerns me with the pace of change and development versus what's happening in some other regions and economies around the world. And the only people that are going to change it are us as parents, right, our companies as business leaders, and if we think about it, organizations, we have a fundamental responsibility that Bill Gates recognizes, that Satya recognizes, to do more to impact society in many, many ways. Two other quick ones on that topic. Scene AI app generated in Canada with cognitive services that allows individuals who are hard of sight or are blind to be able to literally engage with their world in a completely different way through the utilization of visualization services, through cognitive AI, combined with speech, to be able to take a picture of a can of food, know what that is, have a recipe read out, to be able to take a picture of a legal document and move the phone. The phone will literally tell the individual to move the phone and show them that legal document, read it out to them, to be able to take a picture of an activity around them and the picture infer what's the activity of the people that are in their area. Likewise, for individuals now, one of the recent releases that are confined to wheelchairs, of being able to utilize similar tracking in terms of activating, a dual factor authentication with no work on the user, of being able to literally be able to direct where they want to go through with their wheelchair device and opening up their world of independence. These are the positive aspects of AI, and companies like ours do these activities for the good of society. So if you have family members that are in those scenarios, or you have friends, please make sure they know about technology. But we all have a fundamental role to play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, are we on a wrap, or do we have time for one more question, or was there another question?
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
That's
you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very
That's great.
much.
Thank you.